Hello everyone and welcome to today's live stream. Today we have a really fun Q&A about sailing core gameplay, and we are joined by a special guest. You may know him already. It's GentleTractor. Welcome. Hello GentleTractor, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm
Awesome.
doing good, thanks. Yeah, this is a fun one.
First time on stream, no pressure at all. We're also joined by mod Ayzia and mod Elena. Hey guys, how are you guys doing?
Hello. Yeah, I'm good. Melting in the heat, but other than that, I'm good.
Yeah, likewise, doing pretty good. I'm very shiny right now because I refuse to close the curtains to make the lighting better, so you just have to deal with me being a beacon of light.
Nice, Ayzia. Do you want to show the chat your Vimto drink? Because I feel like they'll be very jealous.
Stay hydrated, gamers.
Nice. Nice. You heard it from Ayzia, folks. Stay hydrated. It's really hot outside. But yeah, I was very jealous of that Vimto. Anyways, if you haven't heard already, Old School RuneScape is pulling a brand new skill for the very first time. Oh, no, it's not for the very first time, but yeah, anyway, skip that. Old School RuneScape, let's bring that back, is pulling a brand new skill for the game, sailing. But in order to make it the best that it can be, we're working with the community this time to refine the skill in 4 stages. So we covered navigational mechanics earlier, and now we're talking about how the skill works with core gameplay. So we took on board some feedback and concerns following a Discord stage call. We're super excited. The blog release yesterday, there was such a positive response. So if you haven't checked it out already, make sure to do so using !gameplay for the blog. So I just want to ask the panel here, like, how are you guys feeling now that the blog is out? What do you think? And do you feel like players have finally got tastes of what it looks like to train the skill? We'll start with you, Elena, then work our way around.
I'm quite relieved, to be honest, because what we set out to do was just to answer, quite simply, how do you train sailing? And I feel like we've done that. But obviously, there was this time between us finishing the design of it and getting all of the infographics ready and all of the cool assets. And so during that time, I was just kind of, I'm not going to say I sat around doing nothing. I had other work to get on with, but that nervousness of oh, are they gonna like it? How's it gonna play out? Yeah, that was nerve-wracking, but it seems to have gone down well, and I'm excited to talk more about it today, really.
Awesome. Yeah, I was very nervous myself, but seeing the reaction of the community was just super, super reassuring. So thank you guys for sharing your positive comments. GentleTractor, obviously you've been working with us on the infographics. They're amazing to help players visualize the skill. How are you feeling now that the blog is out? Like, how do you feel that players have responded to some of the amazing work that you've been doing?
Yeah, quite good. I think all things considered, obviously this is it's a really big and probably one of the most controversial topics that you could possibly tap into in Old School. But no, seeing the early kind of responses, I think it's pretty positive, especially seeing different comments along the lines of people who were a bit unsure about it to begin with, maybe kind of on the fence, not really sure how the gameplay systems would work, or really couldn't quite envision it as a skill. Seeing some people start to come around to that and be like, okay, this is really starting to sell it to me now. I can see it, I can visualize it. It feels a bit more tangible and tactile almost. So yeah, that's been really nice to see.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm seeing so much love in the chat for the work that you've been doing. And yeah, just a massive shout out to you. And yeah, hype him up in the chat, guys. We absolutely love his work. Thank you. Ayzia, how are you feeling now that the blog is out? And what's your thoughts so far on player reception and things like that?
I am relieved, I think is the best way to describe it. Going into the whole skill process, I think it was the right call for us to do navigation first because it really set up for the rest of the areas that we wanted to look into during consultation. But core gameplay was by far and large, I think, one of the biggest points of contention within the community from what we saw, especially trying to dispel the concerns over how you would actually train the skill and how it's not a mini game and stuff like that. And I'm just glad that the reception has been as good as it has been because so much work went into that from all of you that are here today on the stream, as well as obviously those who aren't, like Husky and Curse and such. But yeah, it's been really good to see. I'm glad that players are now starting to kind of like come to terms with sailing as a skill. And I've seen so many comments, especially on YouTube, where like we've almost won people over that were dubious of the fact that sailing would work, and they're like, actually, I'm really hyped for this now, and starting to see people suggesting content ideas and how it could work, when it's actually in game, if it does get released, of course. So yeah, relieved and excited.
I think that feedback, sorry, just to shoot it real quick, like a lot of people did say early on that they couldn't see how sailing would be trained. And I completely get that. That was one of the downfalls of the initial pitch of sailing versus the other skills. Like, the other skills had a pretty clear training loop and sailing just didn't. So I'm so glad that we've been able to actually clarify that now.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm super excited to get into it. The reception has been so positive. There are obviously some questions, maybe some concerns that we can kind of address. So we'll get into that in this busy stream. Just to let you guys know, we will do another Pride t-shirt giveaway, but at the end of the stream, because we want the conversation to kind of be around sailing to start with. But stick around for the end of the stream where we will be giving away 2 more Pride t-shirts. So let's just run through the announcements. ! Gameplay for the latest core gameplay blog. We feel that there is something in there for everyone, no matter your play style. So if you haven't already, read it through, tell us what you think. If you don't want to read that long form blog content, we've also got video content within that blog, so you can consume most of what we're saying within like 9 minutes or so. So make sure you check it out. And then ! Game update. The Ruinous Powers beta is back with some freshly updated prayers. Go check out all the latest with the game update by using ! Game update. Okay, so this stream wouldn't really feel right unless we actually gave credit back to some of the amazing community creators that we're working with. They've been absolutely instrumental in bringing our blogs and vision to life with sailing. So the first shout out, I guess, goes to ScreteMonge, aka Gnome. They prepared us an awesome video to show what core gameplay for sailing looks like. We've been working with them in like a series, basically explaining the skill. So I would love to play the clip of him explaining core gameplay in 60 seconds on the stream now.
Welcome to part 2 of the Sailing Development Blog. I'm your host Gnome, and today we'll be discussing the core gameplay loop and what sailing could become if it's voted in as Old School's first new skill. Sailing is all about interacting with various facilities on your ship. While on the water, the wind will periodically change direction, causing your sail to luff. Clicking to refasten the sail awards a small chunk of sailing XP and makes your boat move quicker until the next shift. Primary gameplay is where you train a skill in isolation outside of the core activity. For sailing, we have ship racing, port tasks, shipwreck salvaging, charting, and naval combat. Secondary activities are where sailing is mixed in with other skills: sea monster hunting, mineral dredging, coral farming, and deep sea trawling. Finally, tertiary activities, looking far into future development where sailing is one part of a much greater activity: ship PvP, treasure hunting, aquariums, an ocean raid, and expeditions. And that's all for today. For more information, check out the full video and blog post. Look for us again in another few weeks for part 3, where we discuss what exactly you get from the sailing skill.
Holy moly, shiver me timbers. Was that not the best clip that you have ever seen? Now, if you want to watch this video again, you can watch it to your heart's content. You can watch the full version by typing !video in chat. Make sure to give a like, subscribe, tell ScreteMonge how amazing his content is. We would love to hear it. So yeah, Pog is in the chat for that video. How did you guys feel that video was?
I mean,
think you covered it best.
Yeah, exactly. You said it really well. Shiver
what can
me
we
timbers.
say?
That was great.
Shiver me timbers. I'd like my timbers to be shivered right now. I'm so hot. It's typical UK fashion to complain. But yeah, great video. I actually didn't watch any of the drafts, I'll admit. So that's really bad on my part. So I'm glad like that you were on top of it with the rest of the team on feedback changes. But I purposely kept it for myself as like a little surprise at the end, like a little treat to watch the whole thing. I was hyped afterwards. Really, really enjoyed it. So hope the players do too.
Can I give a little extra shout out as well, just to re-emphasize something for Gnome? If you go and follow him on Twitter for starters at ScreteMonge. He's released a little short 2-minute video of a bit of a behind the scenes of how he put together the gameplay vid, and it's really fascinating because I think a lot of people don't actually realize that everything that he's put together there was what he did. Like, he wasn't given kind of assets by you guys on the old school team. He's actually put together an unbelievably amazing like extension and RuneLite plugin that lets him essentially kind of combine different kinds of models and do crazy sort of animations and stuff sort of in the game itself. So if you're like a little bit behind the curtains looking into what makes a video like that work, then yeah, go and check a follow to ScreteMonge on Twitter and see his little behind the scenes vid.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, GentleTractor. Yeah, ScreteMonge has been amazing to work with, and all of the assets in the video, like we've obviously provided concept art and things like that, but he's been creating that video himself, which is just phenomenal. But our next shout out actually goes to the humble GentleTractor. I know that you've worked closely with Gnome in the past, and we're thrilled to be working with you with sailing for the infographics. So our next shout out goes to you. We'd like to show some of your awesome infographics on the stream. Wow, Pog! What was it like working on these? Like, how did you come up with like the idea to basically start these sort of infographics, which became so popular on Reddit and things like that?
Oh, all those years ago now. God, I don't know how that did properly start. I think it just came from a necessity of trying to like, how do you convey a lot of information in a way that's going to be at least somewhat visual? Because that's like a big thing I think everyone can somewhat appreciate, right? That it's, you know, it can be a bit heavy going trying to just pass through a huge, you know, blog of text or document like that. And so any kind of little visual element can go a heck of a long way. I mean, the whole reason I'm kind of here talking to you guys in the first place was I shared some various, you know, mock-ups of maps and interfaces and all sorts of things that captured a few people's imaginations, and it really does kind of drive home that point of, you know, a visual says a lot, right? That words can't always do. But anyway, yeah, for these kinds of ones, for sailing in particular, it's definitely been quite tough trying to condense down again a lot of information and try to keep those key points known and trying to have little, you know, visual flourishes. For me, I'm definitely more of like a 2D pixel art fan. I can't necessarily say I'm particularly good at it, but I like it, and hopefully some things are okay. So I like doing little visual pixel art elements that kind of feel like they fit in with the rest of the game style and different interface and stuff we have. So yeah, that's kind of what I kind of focus on there, to pull different bits and pieces together to try and give it a bit of a visual identity and style that hopefully looks both nice and in keeping with the old school style.
You are so humble. I think that you're best in class at what you do, especially the way that you condense information down in a way that everyone can understand. It's been incredible in terms of getting information out to people. So just an incredible job. We basically gave GentleTractor a whole list, like a design doc, just a huge design doc. He's managed to basically condense that information down in a way that players can understand it. So yeah, we just really appreciate your work. We love what you do. And yeah, we wanted to show off as well another thing that you came up with, which was the visualization of the captain's log, which I thought was really, really cool. So this is involved with like charting the sea. This was your kind of take on it, and I think it just brings it to life. It got such a positive reception. Elena, do you have any thoughts on this in particular? Was this what you were imagining when you were designing the skill?
It's really cool because like it's just a different take on what I had in mind, but like the same I guess idea, just different executions. I really like the art style you went with. In my head it was more like either like the real world map and just slightly different to that, or maybe like if you remember the area unlocks in Trailblazer League, like maybe more like that. But then you've gone in an entirely different direction again, and I just thought it was really cool. I like the inclusion of the various like ocean regions as well. It really like allures the mind, I guess. Kind of opens your eyes to the possibilities of what kind of oceans we can get to eventually.
Awesome. And then finally the skills tab as well that we saw in ScreteMonge's video, but also I know GentleTractor, the actual icon is something that you worked on, I believe.
Yes,
yeah,
I did.
It looks
I
really
worked on a few
fitting.
different types there, but yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I just love the way it looks. And I saw on Reddit this was like highly upvoted as like skills tab looks so clean. So it really helps you to visualize it. Very, very cool. So yeah, massive well done, GentleTractor and ScreteMonge as well, who isn't here, but we really appreciate your work. And then the last shout out goes to Hooti. He's actually the person behind these amazing thumbnails that you can see on our blogs and our YouTube channel. So thank you so much, Hooti, for this just amazing take on basically sailing gameplay. You've got a bit of coral farming in there. And you can see like the little slippers that the guy is wearing. Sorry, flippers. So yeah, we just think it's awesome, and we absolutely love what you do. So if you're here, Hooti, thank you so much. And if you're not, then we'll see you, I don't know, on Twitter or somewhere. Okay, with that all out of the way, Mod Elena is going to run you guys through the presentation version of core gameplay, so you can just sit back and listen to Elena basically explain the core gameplay of the skill. And then we'll go into questions.
Excellent. Yeah, so like Light said, this is basically just a repeat of the blog, slightly condensed version. But yeah, let's dig into how to train the skill. Before we do that, though, let's do a quick recap of kind of what we established in the previous refinement topic. So obviously, last time we talked about navigation. It was the first thing we covered, and it featured that demo of how you will be on your ship and not you won't be the ship, you'll be on the ship. And it proved that you can move around on the ship while the ship moves at the same time. We also discussed how ships would come in different sizes and how the wind will be impactful, and just much more. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So before we jump into the meat of how to train sailing, let's talk a little bit about what a skill really is. And I'm not going to dig deep into this, but to summarize, in order for sailing to be defined as a skill, it kind of needs two things. The first thing is it needs a clear and simple core gameplay loop, like a set of actions that can be repeatedly done to earn experience. And the other thing is it needs to have a clear progression system that offers both meaningful unlocks, rewards, and incentives to want to train the skill. Cool. So let's dig in. Obviously, every skill in the game has an underlying system for how you gain XP. For Slayer, that is kill a creature. And for firemaking, it's burn a log. For sailing, it's going to be interact with facilities on your ship. This means that on the ship, there will be multiple facilities, and interacting with them correctly will grant you XP. So early on, the most significant facility will be the sails. Roughly every 30 seconds or so, the wind will change directions and your sails are going to luff. And that's a real-life sailing term. It means that the sail is no longer catching the wind as best as it can. And when this happens, you want to fasten the sails again, giving you some XP. And we've been told that it's actually called trim the sails, so we might be changing up that wording slightly, but thank you for calling us out on that. We'll keep that in mind. Cool. But fastening the sails is a very basic activity, so let's talk a bit more about the interesting ways that you can train sailing. And in order to understand how activities fit together to build an entire skill, we've adapted this special framework. So you can see on this list here that we have the core gameplay, which is interact with facilities on the ship. But we also have three categories for training activities. So we've got primary gameplay, which is gameplay that only trains sailing. And then there's secondary gameplay, which includes sort of hybrid methods that offer something for skills other than sailing. And then lastly, you got tertiary gameplay, which includes all other content relating to sailing that aren't considered to mainly be training methods. So these can include stuff like minigames or other activities that kind of borderline that reward space of the skill. So I realized that framework on its own might be a bit dry. So let's take an example that you may be familiar with. Let's analyze how the fishing skill could fit into that framework. So at its core, fishing is simply taking the right tool to a fishing spot and then clicking on that fishing spot and waiting. That's it. Like, that's the whole skill almost. But a training method kind of based on that core system that purely trains fishing would be minnows. And a method that kind of overlaps with other skills, so secondary gameplay, that would be barbarian fishing. And lastly, content that belongs to fishing but strays a bit further away from that core could be temporos. And it's worth noting here that even though we consider like temporos tertiary content, it's still very much used as a training method, but tertiary content doesn't have to do that. It could simply just be a fun activity based on the skill. So now that we understand that framework, let's have a look at what sailing content actually will look like. We're starting off with primary content, and this will include pure sailing training methods. So yeah, if you'd like these, all of these will be part of the sailing skill on release. We wouldn't look to kind of individually pull them as like each of the primary training methods, as they help kind of build strong fundamental baseline for sailing. But each activity has been carefully selected because it offers something different. That said, we still very much want to know which ones you like and don't like, and especially why. So the details of the methods are also far from set in stone. We're happy to change parts of them based on your feedback. Just need a drink, one sec. Closed chat for now, but I hope you guys are enjoying this. Cool. So, the sailing activity that arguably focuses the most on your actual like ability to sail is ship racing. So there's a faction of NPCs called the Barracudas, and they're interested in this speed racing. And they challenge themselves against the dangers of the sea, and they invite brave players to do the same. The routes vary in difficulty, and they could be as simple as just navigating between some rocks, or it could be outsailing a raging storm. The Barracudas like to challenge each other to see who can make it through these natural routes the fastest. And there's some valuable rewards in it for you as well, if you can beat them at their own game. For the most part, ship racing will be a high intensity training method, where the focus is navigating through a route at sea. It's not just about moving the fastest though, you'll also need to utilize the facilities on your ship as well. And there may be obstacles that you'll need to blow up with cannons, or salvage that needs to be picked up with your salvaging hook in order to clear the way. Mastery of your ship, such as catching the wind, taking the turn radius into account when turning, and having built the optimal facilities on your ship, will make this a very engaging activity. And with the activity being high intensity, we kind of also expect the XP to be high, but to balance that out, we probably want the rewards to be a bit on the lower side of the scale. Cool, so next up is port tasks. At the various ports across the game, there's going to be NPCs looking for help, and you can go to a task board to find out how you can assist. So there's going to be 3 main types of tasks. The first one being courier tasks, and they will have you work for a merchant alliance, transporting cargo from one port to another. So make sure to build a large cargo hold on your ship to be able to transport it all. The second one is protection tasks. They're all about clearing out dangers at sea and saving ships that are in danger. You're going to want to kit out your ship with some pretty hefty firepower for this type of task, really. And the last one is investigative tasks that have you track down a lost shipment and transport its contents safely to where it was headed. But be careful, because the sea is dangerous, and there's a reason the shipment got lost in the first place. So you'll want a big cargo hold, a salvaging hook, and firepower for that type of task. Cargo ships and trading vessels, they're of course, a big portion of the real-life ships that would travel the seas. And so staying true to that keeps the skill quite grounded in reality. Tasks have the option of being a low-intensity training method, suitable for more hands-off training as well. But they can also kind of become more intense depending on the tasks that you choose. It's also a good incentive to go explore various parts of the sea by traveling to remote ports. And with some of it being low-intensity gameplay, we kind of expect the XP to start out low, but we could also see this scaling quite well as you level up. The XP has the possibility of going quite high, actually, so if you take on more advanced tasks. And the rewards will range from low to medium. I need a quick few seconds to drink more water. Well, like, my mouth is so dry. Cool. So, shipwreck salvaging. It's quite a relaxed and social-friendly activity. So when you're out sailing, you may come across a shipwreck, and if you have a salvaging hook installed on your ship, you could loot salvage from the shipwreck. And the goal here is to kind of make the world feel a bit dynamic with these kind of random events happening. And they have a chance to kind of happen as you just randomly sail around. Salvage is a unique resource that we'll talk more about in the rewards blog. If you're purely interested in finding shipwrecks, you can also get hints about where the shipwrecks are. We expect there to always be shipwrecks out at sea, so you can continuously just go searching for them. In terms of intensity and XP, these are quite low, but there's the possibility of giving up to medium level of rewards for these, as we feel like it should be worth stopping to salvage them when you find one. Cool. Charting the sea in your captain's log is going to be this one-time opportunity to explore and note down places of interests at sea. Once you've noted down a place of interest, you won't get XP for noting the same place again. This is the one we looked at just earlier. Still think it's a really cool piece of art. Well done, GentleTractor. So the world map already shows you where the sea is, but you can't currently see what's out there beyond just land masses, right? Like when you look at the world map, it's just blue. Like, there's nothing there. But that's what we want to change. So being able to note down the locations of hidden little islands, currents, and just common locations of shipwrecks, for example, these will benefit you as you can use that log as a tool to find out where you want to go next. Cool. Ship combat. Obviously a massive topic in and of itself, but for this section we're going to cover it very, very lightly. In short, firing a weapon installed on your ship, such as a cannon, will grant you sailing XP. And this will scale off the damage you dealt, similar to how existing combat works. And would like to point out here that combat XP isn't granted unless the player character is the one doing combat. So one example I'd like to take to bring in here is if your cannon is firing at a monster, that gives you sailing XP. But if a pirate has boarded your ship and you swing your sword at that pirate, that is combat XP, right? That is traditional combat. So that's the main difference. We expect to add some new creatures at sea for you to fight, but we don't want combat to be the best way of leveling sailing. It's a skill focused on interacting with your ship, and while combat is a part of that, we wouldn't want you to just camp combat throughout the whole skill. That's why the experience is capped at medium XP, though we think it would be valuable as a reward space, and it could lead to some fun gameplay with varied intensity as well. So, on to secondary gameplay. So like we said before, these are hybrid skilling methods, right? Between sailing and some other skill. They have the potential to go in all sorts of directions. So they could be moneymakers or training methods for one of the skills or both of the skills. The design space is just completely open to interpretation at this point, and we'd like to explore these more thoroughly should sailing pass the poll. So even if we don't have all the details yet, we kind of wanted to just include them at this stage anyway, to give you a better understanding of how sailing fits into the world of Gielinor. And because of the impact that these methods will have on existing gameplay, we'd like to poll them separately if sailing passes the poll. So we'll look at which ones you like the most and we'll add those in. And as we go through these activities, you'll notice that some of them require specific facilities. You install these facilities on your ship so that you're kitted out for various adventures. They're a bit reminiscent, actually, of how we use tools in other skills. Cool. Quick water break again. Everyone with me so far? Let me pull up the chat. Yes? No? Thumbs up? We're hanging on. Okay, good. We're almost there, guys. A little bit more. Cool, it's a sea monster hunting. It's quite a high intensity method. The content will have you tracking down a large monster and ultimately slaying it, gaining both hunter, slayer, and sailing XP. It requires you to build the harpoon facility on your ship. And we'd like to note here that we don't imagine this as a method for gaining slayer XP without a task. That's a misconception that I want to clear up immediately. But we could see this as being a new type of task that you can get. I've seen suggestions of like sea-only Slayer Master, or maybe we just add it to the existing Slayer Masters. I'd really love your opinion on that stuff. Or maybe it's just simply locked behind the Slayer requirement, right? So maybe it doesn't actually give Slayer XP, but you require a Slayer to know how to kill it. Many ways we can go with that. Cool, so the next one is deep sea trawling. You probably guessed it already, it's a way of training fishing. And as part of it, you will locate shoals of fish, and it requires a trawling net facility on your ship. So drop out your trawling net, and then navigate the ship to follow the shoal as it moves about to catch fish. The better you can follow the shoal, the more fish you get. And this has the opportunity of adding special new fish. It's an area that we'd like to explore, so that it doesn't completely replace existing fishing methods. But we'll talk more about that in the rewards blog. Mineral dredging is an activity that lets you dredge weighted nets along the seabed in order to gather up precious minerals. It will grant you mining XP, and it has the opportunity to introduce exciting new ores, gems, and minerals. And who knows what other treasure can be found at the bottom of the sea. The method has you training, the method of training has you move less than the deep sea trawling, but we're kind of considering what other gameplay elements we can use to spice it up a bit, right? So maybe you are trawling, but in very specific routes, or maybe you throw in explosives into the water to kind of like shake up the ores and loosen up the ores so that you can grab them more easily. Next up is coral farming. So this activity kind of brings you farming at sea. You can seek out coral reefs to find these new corals, and you can take them home with you. The coral that you farm could be used for crafting, fletching, herb lore. Would love to hear your suggestions on what products you'd love to see come from those skills. What about coral armor or coral tipped bolts? You know, who knows? There's also the idea of having you build your own aquarium in which you can place those corals and maybe like rare fish that you obtain as well. And it could serve as your own farming spot for your self-grown coral. So that's everything for secondary gameplay, but let's talk about tertiary gameplay. So you'll recall that tertiary includes all other content relating to sailing that isn't considered active training methods. So stuff like minigames and gameplay that borderlines reward space and just other things relating to the skill will all fall under tertiary. I can't say that word anymore. Tertiary. We've not designed this type of content, at least not in depth yet, because of the potential size of them. Like, they could be massive. But instead, we're going to give you a list of content that we could see fitting in, and we kind of just want to run an opinion poll after skill, like if the skill passes, to see which ones you like the most. And from those, we'll take some of the concepts further and pull them as normal. So this is the list of tertiary content that we could see fitting in, but we expect that list to grow as you guys get more excited about the skill. And we've kind of already seen some suggestions floating around. But I'd like to reiterate that we can't do all of these, at least not on launch. Maybe sometime in the future, right? Like a long-term vision. But it's not like sailing wouldn't be updated post-launch. After all, we still update all of the other skills in the game, and it's been ages since those launched. Our hope is to do some of it because we know that these are super exciting, and though as a skill release, our main focus has obviously so far been on how to actually train the skill, right? Cool. So I want to quickly also talk a little bit about how upgrades and facilities affect your ship. So you'll be able to upgrade base parts of your ship in order to improve it. So stuff like the keel and the hull and the rudder. And separately from that, unique facilities on the ship can be built. I mentioned some of them earlier. So the salvaging hook to salvage from shipwrecks, the weighted nets for mineral dredging, and the cannon for combat. These are just a few examples of different facilities that you can install on the ship. And the purpose of this is for you to be able to kit out your ship in a way that fits your playstyle. And so that way you can feel accomplished for having the appropriate facilities for the activities that you want to participate in. I like to think of it kind of like the way you gear up for special tasks, right? Like you put on the equipment, you bring the tools that you need. Similarly, you might kit out your ship in a similar fashion. Because having the right tools for the job is a fundamental aspect of a lot of skills in RuneScape. Whew. Deep breath, more water. So, the last topic I want to cover is crewmates. As a captain of a ship, you can recruit crewmates to come sail with you. Crewmates will automate tasks for you so that you don't have to worry about them anymore. However, you'll no longer get XP for the tasks that they completed for you. So for example, if you get tired of fastening or trimming the sails, because you want to focus on navigating and firing cannons, you can recruit someone to automate the fastening of the sails for you. We see crewmates as a way to enable solo players to be able to sail large and colossal ships on their own. And with those ships, there's a lot more going on. And so having someone to help you out will make it just easier to navigate. It's also perfect if you just want to relax and have a more hands-off experience, like if you're on mobile or you just want to chill. But we'll talk more about crewmates in the next vlog as well, where we talk about rewards. So, to summarize absolutely everything so far, almost done guys, I promise. Sailing is a skill with a variety of training methods. At its core, its XP is given by interacting with facilities on your ship. The navigation element includes fastening the sails, and other facilities give access to other gameplay. So you got primary gameplay, which is all about pure sailing training, and it includes activities like ship racing and port tasks. Then you got secondary gameplay, which includes other skills in the mix, such as mineral dredging and coral farming. And then you got tertiary gameplay, which are exciting pieces of extra content that really help the skill feel exciting. But it borderlines reward space, really. And this includes stuff like sea clues and expeditions. And lastly, ships can be customized with the perfect facilities for the task at hand, and you can recruit crewmates to sail with you. And that's everything so far. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Elena.
The best
Thank you,
presenter. There we go. Not presenter. That's like you're giving us presents.
You should give me presents. What do you mean?
I will, for sure. Next time I see you.
Yeah, that was an absolutely awesome presentation, Elena. The chat were really, really vibing with it. There was obviously some questions raised, which we'll get into very shortly, about what makes this a skill versus like another piece of content. But yeah, just a fantastic presentation. I think you really covered everything that we said in the blog. So thank you so much for delivering that for us. And yeah, thank you, chat, for being so patient, listening to it. And yeah, now we will go into the questions. So the first kind of big topic that we've seen pop up ever since we kind of even talked about sailing as a skill is, why are we opting to design this as a skill rather than a content expansion or a mini game? I want to get the panel's thoughts on this. So I'd like to start with Elena, and then perhaps talk to GentleTractor, because he's seen a lot of this stuff throughout the years with this conversation, and then with Ayzia. So Elena, I'm sorry to put you on the spot after you just talked for such a long time. But what's your kind of initial response to this? What do you want the community to think about when they bring up that kind of concern? Like, why is this a skill and not a mini game?
So the first thing that I kind of always default to here is that sailing is a skill in real life. Like, it should be in RuneScape as well, I think. But the other part is that the ocean is just so vast that it feels too big to be a minigame to me. And I think that the sheer size of it kind of lets us add more progression, which just makes it feel like a skill, right? And lastly, I think a skill is just healthy for the game in general. Like, new systems mean that you have new avenues for players to progress, as well as new things we can tie rewards to. And I know power creep has been like a huge topic recently, right? And I believe that the way to stagger power creep is actually to just provide more systems so that you can tie more rewards to different stuff, like different niches and that kind of thing. But yeah, it would also just be like a healthy thing for the game in terms of like bringing people back to the game, or even seeming attractive to like new players, right?
Great response. Yeah, I've struggled with this throughout basically refinement, because it was something that we knew of when we went into sailing refinement, that this was a major concern, and we were very hopeful that with this blog outlining the training methods and kind of helping people visualize how to train the skill, that we would win a lot of those people over and kind of like showcase the potential of sailing as a skill. And hopefully we have done that, but obviously I see there's some concern still from some people. And I just urge you guys to kind of leave your feedback constructively as to what reasonable changes we could make to kind of distance it away from a minigame and bring it more in line with a skill in your expectations. GentleTractor, do you have any thoughts on this? I know this is a big topic, but since you're basically an expert in this area, I would just love to hear your thoughts on it. How do you personally feel on this stance?
Well, expert's a bold claim, but yeah. No, I think it's as you say, it's a very big one. I think the first thing that really helps is like this current clarification of essentially breaking down skills in a more formal process and a very layered structure and framework there, right? Starting with that core element where we can really point towards something which I think for a very long time a lot of players had really struggled with, which is, you know, no fault of their own, because sailing had been this very kind of ambiguous and intangible aspect for such a long time. So having something where you can point towards it and say, look, like the mining skills core is interacting with rocks, like the smithing skill core is interacting with anvils and furnaces, the sailing skill core is interacting with ships and their facilities. It's like, oh, okay, like there's like an immediate grounding in the game world. Like, yeah, this is very skill-like. This is really simple. Click, an XP drop occurs. You can't get more RuneScape skilly than that, I don't think. And then seeing all these additional layers on top where it can flesh out the skill, add additional forms of content, different ways of playing it, hopefully to appeal to different types of players, because I think it's probably true of every single skilling game. I don't think any player out there would like every single training method of every current skill, would they? So I think it only stands to reason that we'd want to try and offer a broad range of things that offer a meaningful variety for different player types and styles there. I'd also kind of, talk about that sensation of progression, which I think is really at the heart of the game, where I'd say it's like basically the reason why most people play, is that sense of setting a goal, working towards that goal and completing a goal, right? And I think that feeling of satisfaction that comes from that meaningful progression is absolutely at its pinnacle within a skill, and not through other systems as well, right? Like you could try and experiment and look at, okay, well, how would an existing skill look if you tried to downgrade it to sort of a minigame status? Would attack feel the same if it just didn't exist and you were just given all weapons immediately and gated them through some other system, like a shop? Maybe a bronze scimitar costs 10 points and a rune scimitar costs 1,000 points, and that's just how weapons are balanced. Otherwise you can get them all immediately, and I don't know, that doesn't feel right to me. Like getting those milestone moments, right? Like level 40 attack, oh yeah, that feels so good, knowing you can now get rune. Getting 60 attack, jumping into dragon, it feels so much better than pretty much any other form of progression system out there. And players have made comparisons to big areas of content and expansion, saying, why can't sailing be an expansion like, maybe like Zaya was a big expansion, a big new landmass released. And that did, it's a very apt comparison, because that did attempt its own form of unique progression, right? It tried it through the current favor system, and sorry to be a bit inflammatory now, but I think it was pretty negatively received, right? It didn't really go down too well. It's gone through a number of iterations since then, but hashtag completely remove favor. Just saying. But yeah, I do think that kind of shows that, what, it doesn't hit the same way when you try and form some of these other more artificial progression systems where we've got such a natural one at the core and the heart of the game. Like, to me, old school RuneScape is built on the back of its skill system, and having like an extra skill in play there that you can progress through, 99 points of progression, and then micro progression in the forms of individual XP drop, that just feels so much better to me than any other alternative. Sorry, that was a very long answer there to your question.
That was fantastic. I mean, I could see the chat completely change when you were talking, Tractor. So yeah, really, really appreciate that. Does anyone want to add anything to that kind of discussion? I feel like we could talk about this all day, really, with chat. So, Ayzia, did you have any thoughts?
I don't think I can say anything better than what GentleTractor just did then, as well as what Elena mentioned. But the thought that I kind of have in my head, especially around the expansion side of things, is that I almost see sailing as an expansion in its own right. It's quite literally an expansion to the game. It touches so many different areas and has so much potential that, if nothing else, that's what warrants it being a skill, so that you can actually train it in a way that you would train other skills and have access to all of that extra content. But so much comes from it that I don't think it's wrong to consider sailing as an expansion, to be honest. I don't think that's a bad thing. I just think that it's bigger than it just being an expansion to existing content alone, which is obviously why we're looking at it as a skill perspective instead. Because we could add elements of sailing as expansions to other skills, sure, but that would be trickled out over the course of multiple years, that then when you look at the bigger picture, they probably don't feel as connected as what they should do, whereas sailing can bring all that together in one release and have meaningful progression along the way, and then touch on absolutely every aspect of the game that players want it to. So that's pretty much, yeah, that.
I could piggyback off of that again, sorry, just to keep talking some more, if that's okay.
Please do.
Yeah, it just made me think, because like this is going to be a bit more of a whimsical one now, but I think there's something that the game has lost over the last 10 years, and that's not actually having like a new skill release. What that feels like on day one release of a new skill, right? Like I'm an old-timey RuneScape boomer at this point, right? I've been playing this game for over 20 years, since RuneScape Classic, so I kind of still remember all the different skill releases, all the RuneScape 2 ones, and there is genuinely absolutely nothing that captures what the release day of a new skill does to the game. Like the day that Slayer came out and people were racing through the ranks, finding each of the different monsters, figuring out what they dropped. People standing around at farming patches on day one of farming, figuring out, like, is this how I farm? Just standing and watching crops grow? It's like, no, buddy, it's not. But people didn't know any better. And it truly is like the great equalizer where everyone can get on board. There is no other content release, no kind of quest or PVM content or raid or any sort of addition to the game can appeal to so many players like a skill can, right? Like a max player, 2277, can come along and play with someone fresh off the boat from Tutorial Island with a new skill. and that's completely unlike any kind of content you can release. And I can't emphasize enough just how good that feels. I sometimes wonder, maybe there's just like quite a lot of players who don't remember that era, or maybe didn't even play. A lot of players did start in mid to late 2000s and didn't get to enjoy that, that fun, what in my opinion is a bit of a golden age of lots of skills and lots of content, lots of fun stuff coming out all the time. But to me, there's something very magical about that, and getting everyone there on day one of a skill that you just can't capture through any other piece of content release.
Absolutely. I want that so much for the game. I can see the community is just so strong at this point, and I can see, there's always going to be people complaining about wanting more content, and I think a skill would absolutely revolutionize things and do exactly what you were saying, GentleTractor, like just get everybody involved, no matter what kind of player they are. There's something for everyone, which I just think is awesome. So yeah, thank you so much. All right, so hopefully we've answered that kind of discussion. We could obviously talk a bit longer about it, and perhaps that's something for another stream where we just kind of talk about these kinds of things a bit more. But since it's a Q&A, I'll just go on to the next question. So in the blog, we categorize training methods into 3 types. We had primary, secondary, tertiary methods. Since primary gameplay only gives sailing XP, a lot of players are a bit worried that only the primary methods are going to be kind of the meta ways of training the skill. And so there's a concern that like the best method might be something that a player doesn't really like compared to another kind of method. So how are we looking at balancing all of the methods so that certain ones don't become obsolete and that things are worth doing? So the main issue I've seen here is like, if people don't like ship racing, for example, is that going to be the meta way of training the skill if they're not a fan of like racing or speedy content? Elena, can we start with you on that one?
Yeah, sure. So I guess the way I see it is that primary is the main training methods, right? But the whole reason why we're giving so many different training methods is so that you have variety in what you can do. And if you don't like one of them, there's probably some other thing that you like. It's very hard to kind of balance everything perfectly at this stage, right? Because we haven't even begun developing it. We're waiting until sailing actually passes the poll, if it passes. So saying what will be the meta at this stage is just too early to tell. But, that's something that maybe we just lean on opinion polls for that, right? Like, maybe we just ask the community, hey, do you think this method should be the highest XP granting one, for example, in comparison? Or maybe, like, rank all of these methods and tell us in what order should these give the most to the least XP, perhaps. So I guess my answer is the main training methods are the primary ones, but the exact rates and stuff aren't set in stone. We can easily change that around.
Awesome. And we are planning on having a beta should sailing pass the green light poll, where we would take more feedback into account. So yeah, I think that's reasonable to expect. I mean, it's really, really difficult to know exact XP rates and answer those questions that players have. I've seen a few. So hopefully we'll be able to kind of give you as much information as we can, and then discuss that later on when we actually have started development. Because remember, we're in the design stages of sailing. We are not like actually developing it, like coding it or anything like that at this stage. Okay, so I'll move on to the next one. There's so much content on offer, as shown by our latest blog, and we've had to strike a balance between showing the potential with sailing, like what it can become, versus not over-promising and perhaps extending the length of the project or development out too far. So could we just explain to players what training methods that they can absolutely expect to have on launch, and then what we're looking at for post-launch, and are there kind of like in-betweens where we're not sure yet where it's going to come?
It really is a tricky balance to strike, because like I played the game quite a lot myself, and I played before I joined Jagex as well, and I can absolutely relate to just waiting for an update and waiting and just wishing it would come out. And so with sailing, like, if I wanted to come out sooner, obviously I would want it to come out finished, but I wouldn't want it to also take too long, if you get what I mean. And so that's a balance that we need to find, right? Like, hypothetically, if Sailing took 10 years to develop, it probably wouldn't be worth it, right? Because you guys would all be moving on to something else in the meantime, like playing Bounty Hunter 3 or something, you know? So Sailing wouldn't be as relevant anymore. So it's an interesting topic for sure, and I think kind of the stance that we've had so far is obviously we don't know exactly how much content we can fit in because we haven't really started refining like our backlog for all of this, like looking at the code and how long would this take to code and how versus how long would this thing take. But our goal is to include all of the primary methods, and we will pull the secondary ones and try to get in as many as possible based on, you know, you guys' opinion, like what the community basically wants us to do out of those. And then the tertiary stuff will most likely be post-launch. Like, I could see us fitting in 1 or 2 maybe, depending on the size of them, but they're quite big projects, right? Which, to be fair, a skill is just like a series of multiple projects. It's an interesting way to think about it. Yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to say on the topic.
Awesome. Is there a chance though that players might, you know, be able to squeeze in some secondary that are pulled during development for the launch of the skill? So if they really like, was it sea monster hunting? Do you think that could be for launch, or is it post-launch thing, or is it just too difficult to tell?
If that's what players want us to focus on, we could absolutely do that. Like, Husky and I were talking about maybe just giving you guys a list of all of them and polling like the order that we should make them in or something like that. That could be quite cool.
Oh,
I
nice.
like that.
Very, very cool.
Yeah. And I mentioned this during my presentation as well, but there was a lot of information there, to be fair. But the way I think about this is like sailing should obviously feel like a finished skill, or like a full skill, if that makes sense, when it releases, but it shouldn't be finished either. Like, look at the existing skills in the game. Like, they didn't launch finished. We kept adding to it. We still add to them. And so Sailing should do the same. I would absolutely expect there to be Sailing updates, like, years after its release, right? Like, obviously, not that long after. Like, we'd probably have several after as well, like, in the immediate future. But, yeah, absolutely. Keep updating it.
Yeah, I think that kind of speaks to what GentleTractor was saying earlier about how a skill is basically a system pretty much that gets expanded upon. I think that's what you were saying. Sorry if I'm phrasing it wrong. But yeah, we would absolutely expect to keep building on it post-launch, and it's just figuring out that healthy balance of like what do you want in for launch, and then what should be prioritized later. And the actual like process behind all of that, like behind the scenes where you're actually trying to plan out this stuff, is really, really complex. So yeah, we're not able to give you like all the specifics, but we're hoping that the kind of flavor of stuff that we've shown you so far with the detail is enough for you guys to make a good decision when it comes to the green light poll. Right, so the next question is, with sailing, we made the decision that using any facility on your ship gets you XP. At a surface level, I think that this is quite simple for everyone to understand. And we gave an example of like fastening your sails as one of the easiest ways to kind of visualize how you would train the skill. But for some players, I've seen that this, you know, can feel a little bit too simplistic, or may I even say like boring in their eyes. So could you explain a little bit about how we intend to layer gameplay mechanics, for example, with NPCs, and just reassure players that the gameplay isn't just going to be about luffing your sails from 1 to 99. How do we get that like good balance of like something simple to understand, but also engaging and won't want to make players kind of feel bored, basically?
And so I'm just gonna like loop back to what I was saying before, really, on the whole topic of this is why we're showing so many methods, right? Like, we want there to be something that appeals to most people and also appeals to you in different settings. Like, sometimes I'll be on the bus or I'll just be on the couch, like playing on my mobile, and I don't want to do something intensive. I don't want to like sweat out gameplay at that point. Like, I just want AFK woodcutting or something, or watch a movie on the side. But sometimes I am sat at my computer and wanting to pay 100% attention to the game, and so naturally you're going to want different methods for that. And that's kind of what we've tried to capture in the different training methods. Does that answer it?
Yep, absolutely. Did anyone want to add anything? I appreciate a lot of these questions was just Elena focused, but I'm hoping that as we go in, GentleTractor,
Yeah, I can add a little bit more, maybe.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think to sort of like hark back to what you were saying before as well about just the overall potential for the skill going forward too, right? Like that's what I quite like about the sailing core being that interacting with the ship facilities, right? You've got the consistent basis of your ship. That's like that's your home base for sailing, all things sailing related. But then these facilities on it, well, they could kind of be anything, right? Like the sky's the limit, whatever your imagination comes up with. So just like a skill wants to be full but not necessarily complete, I could totally see just like more little facilities. Whenever a cool idea comes along for a new little mechanic or form of sailing that could occur on a particular ship type, then that could equal a new facility being added to your ship, and then obviously that's just another little source of sailing XP. So it's not just that same one individual fastening or trimming of the sails or what have you. So I think there's just a ton of potential there for all those little interactions that can just add up over time and just gradually be added to, right? It's one of those skills that's quite unique, or will be, in that it can just sort of keep expanding and becoming more interesting and varied, I think, as time goes on, rather than feeling like it replaces old things coming before it. So that's quite unique, and I think quite special about it too.
Great commentary there, Tractor. Ayzia, do you want to add anything?
I'm good on this one. I think it's all been covered.
Nice. Okay, so do you think that there is going to be something for, I guess we've already talked about it, but something for really high level, the HLC competitive community to like sink their teeth into, because they want the like sweaty tick manipulation gameplay. They want to feel like it's engaging and fun. I've talked to some of those lovely people on Twitter. Shout out HLC. What is in it for them, basically, with this skill?
So I think it's very hard to start deciding exactly what you click and when at this stage of it. We haven't even pulled the skill yet, right? But I do think that ship racing is probably one of the most intense training methods right now. It's too soon to say if it would include any tick manipulation. Like, maybe you have facilities on your ship that we could have that you need to keep up with and tick manipulate somewhat while also steering other things, who knows. But I think it's worth considering for sure, if that's a genuine concern from the community and genuinely something people want. I think maybe we can also add intensive gameplay that doesn't have to be tick manipulating for it to be demanding. Like, it's absolutely like not intended gameplay. I'd rather intend for this gameplay, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does kind of like take the magic away from it a little bit as well if you're like trying to get tick manipulation to be a thing. Like, as chat is saying, a lot of it is just unintentional, and high level players will find these little things and be like, oh, I found the best strat for this. So but what else?
I'm sure there will be ways to kind of min-max stuff even though it's not tick manipulation. And I think it's worth considering for the rewards as well, right? Like, what if you could go to an island where you could tick manipulate a tree, for example, right? Maybe there's a new type of tree that you can tick manipulate now. So instead of teaks, it's another tree.
Awesome. Did anyone want to add anything?
I guess on my part, it's just more about covering from a community perspective, because I'm obviously seeing a lot of the chat who are very anti-tick manipulation, and fair enough, it's not for everyone. But I think it's important to remember that we are looking to cater towards very different types of play styles across the board so that sailing can feel inclusive for the whole community. I agree with Elena in the sense that I don't think we should go out of our way to implement tick manipulation as a method. And at the end of the day, if it's going to happen, the players that like to do that will probably find it themselves regardless. But I do think that it's fair to say that we need to be able to accommodate the higher level players just as much as we do for those that want to play casually every now and then, or just all the time watching TV and playing on the side. So the variety of methods out there will will definitely dictate that. But in terms of actually making it so that tick manipulation is something that is part of a design goal, I'm not too sold on that specifically. Having the reward space that works in the same way that existing things do, as Elena mentioned with the trees, would be a good example. But yeah, I think it would be poor of us to implement intentionally tick manipulation methods that were best in slot, because that would just then, I feel like it would just then enforce everyone to feel like they have to. Whereas obviously with the methods that are available at the moment, they weren't intentional from design, and we've left them in because players have got used to them. So I think what I'm trying to say is that I just want sailing to feel really inclusive, and that includes those players that want high intensity, high experience methods that keep them feeling engaged all the way through to potentially 200 mil all, because I think that's something that a lot of players just forget about. We do have a considerable amount of players out there who do like to chase those stretch goals, and whilst you might find it pretty fun to level up to level 99 in sailing using all of the traditional methods, when you're then repeating that over and over for hundreds of hours, it can become a little bit less enjoyable. So that's, I think, where a lot of the requests for, or at least desires for manipulation methods come from, because it keeps it interesting. It keeps you engaged during that entire time. You can't slack off. So it's just more fun when you're doing a longer grind. So yeah.
I think there's also something really satisfying about like predictable, repeatable patterns in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't have
for
to
sure.
be
When you get into that
manipulation.
rhythm, it does feel great.
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
right. Time flies as well when you are doing a method efficiently. It makes the game feel completely different.
There's a lot of opportunities as well for more kind of organic integration, kind of like what you were saying, right, with sailing. Maybe there are just very, very special select zones of the ocean where it's just very rapid moving winds, and you've got to pay attention to that a lot more frequently, right, with your sails changing and just things like storms rolling through or more aggressive monsters and all different things like that, right? Like I think there are much more naturally baked in ways that you can do that, where you can offer much more high intensity gameplay, perhaps in a much more optional capacity as well. So it's very clear where you want to go if you want to do these things, or you can just avoid it if you don't want to. So instead of, like you were both saying there, not having to rely on strange 20-year-old quirks and oddities of the system that have just been born out of the players' inquisitive minds finding these strange things, actually like purposefully designing things to function in a way that makes sense and hopefully feels fun at any intensity level. Absolutely agree. I think hopefully we've given enough training options that there's at least one or more things that appeal to people. And I absolutely agree with what the panel basically said. So hopefully that answers the concerns. Now let's talk about ship racing, because this is one of the hot topics from the most recent blog. It kind of ties into what we were talking about earlier when we were talking about highly engaging gameplay. I would just like to confirm with Elena, ship racing is against NPCs. It's not against other players. You're not going to have to compete against your friends for ship racing.
So the way I see it is, it's primarily you against the ocean, right? And it's kind of you against the natural sort of dangers at sea. Be that, like dangerous reefs or rocks or storms and that kind of stuff. But there's this faction, right? The NPCs called the Barracudas, and they live off of this. Like, they thrive on this thrill-seeking kind of race against nature, sort of. And so what they do is they time themselves, essentially, like speeding through these routes. And I've seen a lot of feedback on this topic, right? Like, does it have to be time gated and all that kind of stuff? And I think it doesn't have to be. Like, we can explore options here where it's like you complete the route, but maybe you get like extra rewards or something, like either extra XP or maybe like a resource that you get from beating them at their own game, right? But considering that this needs to be repeatable content as well, like it's actually a training method, right? It's not a one-off. We might want to consider whether like timing it just maybe feels bad. It's one of those that we kind of just have to see what it feels like once it's implemented, and then kind of, or at least like try navigating a lot and see what it feels like to navigate across a route like that, and see and decide then. But yeah, to to be specific, it's mainly you against the sea. So you against the dangers. The time is optional, I would say, at this stage. But it would be mainly against the NPCs. Though we do want to include leaderboards, I think, for this, like if we still keep the times. So I think there's something fun there where you can kind of compete for world's best, Karamja run route or something like that.
Awesome. Great clarification there. And I love the idea of using time as more of a bonus rather than necessarily like gatekeeping people. So one thing that I would be remiss not to mention is the comparisons with ship racing and potentially agility. And I know for a fact that after we had our stage call, we saw that feedback and tried our best to kind of remove any instances of like associations to sea agility. Basically, we didn't want it to come across as sea agility. But kind of what is your response to this kind of concern just generally? I'd love to also get GentleTractor's take on this as well. Like, why are people making comparisons to sea agility and how do we feel about it?
Yeah, shall I jump in first then?
Yeah, sure.
I think the sorry, yeah, I guess the obvious and kind of logical comparison there, why it comes up, is just that element of movement, right? Like agility is kind of like the de facto movement skill. Sailing is kind of the act of moving at sea. So there's always been kind of natural comparisons being made there, and I think that's why kind of ship racing comes up. And obviously the nature of the course structure that agility runs off of, and hearing something like a race or going around something, there's obvious comparisons there. I do think there's enough to be distinct though. I think agility gets obviously a very bad rep and is generally speaking not super well beloved because it's very very simplistic, it's very static, and it's very linear, right? It's all very kind of subdued and basic in what it's doing and how it's structured. You just sort of click in the same big, well, these days it's usually a bright big green box on RuneLite and following the path around the same way again and again. Whereas based on some of the descriptions I've heard for ship racing at least, and having like a few more subtly dynamic elements to it, maybe it's over a slightly larger area, dealing with these different kind of oceanic effects and hazards, and then utilizing your actual different features on your ship, right? Like using those facilities. Maybe you've applied, a proper kind of battering ram on the front of your figurehead of your ship to crash through a certain kind of wreckage point, or you're stopping by to try and like remove some big areas of debris with a salvaging hook as you try and careen around a big corner and dodge a giant wave coming through. I don't know, that to me sounds a lot more engaging and interesting. And when you look at the parts of the agility skill in particular that people, generally speaking, tend to like, it's things like Hallowed Sepulchre, and I'd fully agree with that. Like, it has that nice level of dynamicism to it that just feels quite good and satisfying when you properly get into it and you get into that kind of flow state. I really think ship racing could hark into that, the good parts of those elements of that skill, while perhaps circumventing and sidestepping some of the less desirable ones. But I do get the comparison. It's kind of inevitable in a way, but I don't think it is fully 100% apt.
Mm-hmm.
Great take.
That's very similar take to mine, actually. I would, when I see the comparisons, what I want to understand is what part of agility are players thinking that it's so reminiscent of. And I think Twitch chat really just now have kind of hit the nail on the head when they bring up Sepulchre, just like GentleTractor mentioned there as well. But is that really a bad thing? Because the Hallowed Sepulchre is a really good agility training method, and if we're able to, and by the way, this isn't the intention for what it's worth, but let's just say that we are able to recreate an experience similar to that fits into sailing as a skill. Why is that a bad thing? Do players really think that that's a bad thing? And if so, let us know so that we can look to adjust any of the design for it. But I personally don't think it is. Players really love the Hallowed Sepulchre. Why not look and take from what we've done before, learn from it, and then improve it for other pieces of content? And I think that the way that sailing makes it so much more interactive and engaging with a whole host of other features that we just wouldn't be able to pull off in something like traditional agility is one of the main reasons why, yeah, they're similar, but they're not the same. And I think it's okay for things to be similar as long as it's similar to the good aspects of it rather than just the poor. So
one thing that we did look at in feedback, like after the stage that we had, was that the idea of sepulcher at sea, some people absolutely loved it, but some people were understandably cautious about it because they felt that it was almost too difficult or too challenging content, and they didn't kind of want that to be necessarily a primary method. So we really wanted to look at how can we make this welcoming to every kind of player, like even if you're not a hardcore sepulcher player, maybe you're just sort of like starting out, how do we make ship racing feel approachable to every kind of player? And Elena, I don't know if you can talk a bit about that in terms of like your vision for making this kind of content appealing at the higher end, but also at the lower end of players.
So I want to open with a bit of a spicy take. I don't think every piece of content needs to be approachable by everyone, because the sooner you do that, you kind of just ruin the charm of it. Like, if everything just feels the same, eventually nothing is special, right? Like, it's good to have different pieces of content. That said, I also think that we could have different kind of races around the world, right? So you could have one that's maybe quite early on, like level 10, you unlock this Karamja run one, right? And maybe it's quite a simple one, but then at level, say, 50, you unlock like an extension to that route, and suddenly it's like way more difficult. You don't have to do that. Like, maybe it's not for you. Go play something, like go do another activity or do the race that you feel comfortable doing, you know? But like I said, we can play around with the times as well. Like, the times don't need to be a punishment. Maybe it's just a bonus, like if you hit it. Lots to consider there, and lots of things for us to kind of consider during playtests, I think, as well. Like, when we actually get to jump in the game and see how it feels.
So do you feel like ship racing has that skill ceiling for those like more, I guess, apt players, that they can take that challenge further, but it's not going to be like a punishment to the people that maybe can't necessarily do those higher intensity kinds of ship races?
I think at
There's
the
like a
higher
wide
end it could
ceiling.
be, yeah. So I guess that's my dream, right? A low entry point, but a high skill ceiling for really mastering it, I think would be the dream. So someone
Very,
say
very
Tokyo
nice.
drift sailing. I love that.
Drift
Cool.
boats.
All right. So, sorry, Ayzia, did you want to say something?
All I was going to say is it just kind of ties back into the point that I made earlier, which was around we need to make sure that content appeals for everyone, and we can't forget that high-level players exist, and if the racing is more appealing to high-level players, then that should be fine, because there are a whole host of other training methods that we are looking to implement, and Elena basically covered it. Just adding words for the sake of it, because that's what I do.
Cool. All right. Well, if you're in the chat, if you're a high-level player, we would love to know, what do you think about this? Let us know, and give us your thoughts and constructive feedback. Join the Discord, etc. Okay. So we've gone through that question. One last one on ship racing. Does it need to be a primary training method? Because there are a few concerns that something that might be competitive, even if you're only competing with the sea, shouldn't feel like a primary method. I feel like a lot of this is to do with a misconception that you're competing against other players, and perhaps that's not an issue. But how do you feel about ship racing potentially being a secondary method if the feedback was that way?
So I'd argue that putting your navigational skills to the test is like the most sailing-like thing we could ever do. But like I said, we could discuss like the time-limited thing. I think, if I'm correct, like that's the main issue that people have with it being a primary training method. That doesn't mean that you have to train it. Like, I think we listed port tasks as like quite high experience as well. So maybe that could be more of an alternative route, right? If you don't feel like doing ship racing.
Cool. GentleTractor, did you have any thoughts on this whole conversation about primary versus secondary for ship racing? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I guess it does very quickly it can very quickly at least evolve into sort of arguing semantics and word choicing at the end of the day. But I don't know, I kind of agree with Elena there, where I think the fundamental action of being a good navigator of your ship feels just like so intertwined with the core act of sailing itself that it feels kind of wrong to try and forcibly move it out of primary just because people don't like a certain perceived feature of it, or times, or competition or whatnot. But I think maybe a different way of looking at ship racing is just looking at how it could be just continually expanded upon to like touch into different things, right? Like, who's to say there couldn't be also like a secondary form of ship racing that does actually tie in other features or factors, right? Like, what about a weird cross ocean / land ship race where part of it is on the water and then part of it is on land and then back on water again, and now it's like a secondary action involving lots of skills, and it's like a really weird hybrid mashup, right? Like, I think there are lots of ways you could expand it out and maybe even turn it into tertiary things. I've seen a really cool, shout out to the new skill Discord and all the different things that players have been sharing their ideas wise. I think I've seen one that described this really cool Everstorm, I think they called it, like a giant maelstrom type thing where you'd be sort of outrunning or racing against that as well, and seeing that as maybe even a bigger tertiary sort of mini game activity thing. So I don't know, I think there are lots of ways that it could be applied into different aspects or could just be expanded upon in different ways, but I do think the heart of it does feel very kind of primary sailing, like with the navigation features to me.
I wonder if it might just be like the name that's the issue, and I've seen a couple of comments here, like the name and the structure of that is the problem, and like we're absolutely not tied to that, right? Like, we could change that. Like, what we want from it is a navigational challenge. That's about it, really. Like, a high intensity navigational challenge. It doesn't have to be a race. Like you say, it could be outrunning a storm instead. Like, maybe it's just called storm sailing instead of ship racing, right?
What I mean,
very, very
when we've got things like, just as simple as literally described as port tasks, but port tasks then build into things like couriers, protection, or investigating. Literally, I was just thinking, and I'm terrible when it comes to being creative, but something along the lines of like naval challenges as the very top level name for it, and then within there could be one of them is race against an NPC, another is to navigate through a storm, and so on and so forth, as opposed to racing, which I think is where a lot of people are getting that idea of that it's going against someone else or going against the clock in a traditional sense, even though you might be doing that, but it would be more subconscious rather than conscious, and it then ties into, okay, well, racing, I'm with someone else. Racing implies running or moving, and the agility like association with that. So
cool.
I'll be
All
fine with
right,
something like that,
a lot of comments about storm chasing.
Storm chasing reminds me of when you get in a car and you go drive and you try and find storms. Have you seen those American TV shows where they like literally risk their
Tornado
lives?
Hunters.
And I'm like, why would you do that? Why would you risk your life?
Yeah, just do it, but on your ship now. Come on.
Yeah, we need that in Gillinor right now.
Yeah, why not?
It's crazy. But yeah, you guys have really given a lot of thoughts in chat of like what we should do. I think the general feeling from players is that it's a cool high intensity method. There's a bit of like caution, understandably. So we'll go away, we'll look at the feedback. But if it's a case of like making it less about racing and more just about navigational challenges, that's easy for us to do. We can change the name. And generally speaking, we do feel that it fits as a primary method because we feel that it fits as a sailing kind of activity. But we'll obviously take a look at that feedback and make sure that we take it into account. So we really appreciate it. Oh gosh, we have a few more. I'll try and stop in about 10 or 15 minutes if that's okay. Cool. So, right, the next question is, in the blog, we touched on the idea that ships have their own combat system, but we didn't really expand on the combat system. We just said kind of combat on the ship would give sailing XP if it's your ship doing damage, and not combat XP. And some players have asked for a bit more detail on ship combat. They were wondering what the appeal is of ship combat when we have combat already in game. So I would love to get your thoughts on this. Anyone can take this.
You want me to start?
Yes, please.
So, the way I see it is, there might be creatures out at sea that you simply aren't strong enough to defeat, right? Like, sure, you can defeat everything you've found so far at land, but what about a massive sea creature? Or how are you going to use your Tumikin's shadow to sink an entire ship, right? Like, if you're fighting a pirate ship and they're trying to sink you, like, how do you deal with that? So I think it makes sense to include some sort of ship combat. And we were talking very loosely about how, because it doesn't follow, regular combat rules, what we could do is just like boost the damage numbers quite a lot as well, and say that, like, oh yeah, the base damage for the standard cannon is like 500, right? Like, that would feel really cool. Like, look, I hit a 1000 against that ship, right? Like, just to make it feel really different. We could change up the hit splats and everything to make it feel like, it's significantly different. Like, it doesn't... I would say it should resemble combat, but it shouldn't feel the exact same, because otherwise, what's the point, right?
Awesome. So I think we covered that basically in one. I'll move on to the next one. So there's a few discussions about XP per hour, comparing different methods. So the idea of low, medium, or high rates actually varies between skills quite vastly. Someone in the Discord pointed out, like, something low for mining is very different to low for construction. Like, they're very different. Can we talk a bit about the philosophy behind the XP ballparks that we gave? And also talk about how long you expect it to take 1 to 99 for the average player. It's really, really difficult to tell at this stage, but what's your thoughts on this, and what do you want players to take away from this discussion, when they ask us questions about XP rates? Like, what do you wish they would know?
It's an interesting question. I think... I guess there were several questions there.
Yeah, there was like 5, sorry.
Yeah. I guess in terms of the XP ballparks, it's really because we don't know yet, right? Like, what we're trying to do is kind of see, where does this activity fit in compared to this activity? But we haven't set, like, the baseline XP, right? So we haven't said what is medium XP, or what is high XP, what is low XP. Like, we don't know that yet. I'd be kind of open to feedback on this, like how fast you guys feel like XP should be gained. Like, how much XP per hour do you reckon you should get at level 50, at level 70, at level 99, right? Like, give us a ballpark that you think is right, because we could absolutely look at existing skills and kind of base it off of that. So what skill do you guys think does it well, and what should we aim for? Like, we're very open to kind of seeing what feels right.
It's an interesting
Here's
one. I'm
another
looking at the
interesting-
chat. I can see so
Sorry,
many
I was
different numbers. Sorry, Gentle.
I'm sorry,
Please go ahead.
the delay. Killing. I was going to say just about experience, whatnot. A new skill, it presents a really interesting opportunity that we've literally never had before in games, well, when it comes to XP rates. And like you mentioned, all of the current skills are all a little bit lopsided. Some very fast, some very slow, and some cause really big design challenges, I imagine, for you guys on the team when it comes to, you've got this old skill. It's got a really, really high intensity training method that everyone does, but it's really pathetically low XP, and it starts at a really low level. It's like, how do you go beyond that? Like, you can't comfortably without disrupting a lot of things, and the progression gets kind of all kinds of thrown out of whack, and you hit these plateaus at weird level bands that don't make a lot of sense. So that's what a new skill I think is really interesting for as well. It's a blank canvas for the first time. You can actually properly lay out, okay, what should a skill really look like? Training it, what should the XP be like at low levels, at mid levels, at high levels? What should the low intensity content be giving? What should the high intensity content be giving? And actually create a proper broad kind of spectrum and a good spread covering all the bases and all the areas from low to high to make sure the whole skill feels positive and like you're always gaining, greater XP per hour every level you're getting higher and higher up. And also each individual activity is like appropriately balanced against one another. Because obviously we do end up with a lot of kind of deadish content in game from just years gone back because it wasn't factored in to be balanced alongside this high intensity tick manipulation thing that exists at level 40 whatever, right? So I think that's an interesting consideration, just to have a skill like sailing or just any new skill. Is that how you can, you've really got that blank canvas to start fresh and make a proper, robust, well-designed XP curve from 1 to 99?
That is something that we were discussing in our kickoff, like, what was it, a few months ago, when we sat down and we were like talking about, for example, Hunter and all the issues that we had with it. And we were like, we definitely want to we want to make a good skill, right? And so being able to see it through from 1 to 99 and like all of the bits and pieces that go in between, I think it's going to feel a lot more fleshed out and like a better player journey as a result of that, because we know that that's the goal for a lot of players, is to get to 99, whereas I think in the past skills weren't designed with that kind of like full thing already planned out. So really, really good point there, GentleTractor. We have 2 more questions, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the giveaway that's going to run for the next 2 questions while we answer them, and then we'll roll it at the end and we'll contact you. So get ready, guys. If you want to take part in the Pride giveaway, we have a little image of the t-shirt when we're giving these away throughout June. To enter the giveaway, you need to type in the word scurvy pilled. Well, I'll type it in the chat. Scurvy pilled. And just enter that word in. You don't need to enter it more than once. And hopefully, in about 5 to 10 minutes time, we'll roll the giveaway. And one of you, or actually
we have a problem. Hold on.
We do. Oh,
everyone's typing in
Don't
caps and
say it
getting
in
timed out.
caps.
Yeah,
oh,
do it in
no.
lowercase, chat.
Okay.
Do it in lowercase.
Sorry,
'cause
chat. Lowercase.
You will get destroyed otherwise.
It's less of like a. It's a quiet. It's like scurvy pilled. It's like scurvy pilled.
Yeah.
Just say
Just
scurvy
whisper it.
pilled.
Scurvy pilled.
Scurvy pilled. Yeah. So hopefully that's running. Okay, cool. We're gonna check in with our.
in italic, honestly.
Okay, it's
cool.
working.
It's running.
Good.
So we'll ask the next 2 questions, scurvy pilled, and then we'll go back. Right. So the next question is: we had some questions around ships and sinking. Can you explain the approach to ship sinking? Do you consider it to be a safe death for hardcores, or do you not know at this stage? Do you think players are going to lose items or potentially their ship? What do you think, Elena?
So we've gone a bit back and forth on this. I think generally where we stand is that just like how ship combat is a bit different to traditional combat, I think that your ship capsizing doesn't necessarily mean that you die with the ship, right? Like maybe you land in the water and some sailor is passing by and decides to tow your ship and save you, right? And maybe you pay some money to like fix up your ship or whatnot, but personally, I don't want just capsizing to be a death. Like, getting sent off to port and having to pay for repairs is kind of punishment enough, in my opinion. But we've also talked about kind of having dedicated resources that you gain from sailing and having you store them in the cargo hold of your ship. And so I would say that maybe instead of losing your items and gear and that kind of stuff, like maybe you lose just the stuff in your cargo hold, for example, instead. Which is an interesting mechanic, because then that opens up the door for like, okay, maybe down the line you can actually upgrade your ship in a way that lets you keep more of those when you die, so that you don't actually lose as much from your cargo hold. It's a super interesting theme, and I think it's something that we need to think a bit more about, but yeah.
Ooh,
Anything else on that topic? Is it a hardcore death? Probably not. But I would say, like, if you get, like, again, if you get boarded and your character is the one dying, like you get stabbed by a pirate or something, then yes, it's just a traditional death.
It's going to be a really interesting dynamic, actually, between the two. Like, when you have to consider ship combat acting differently to normal combat, and then ship death separate to your own character death. I really like that, personally. I find it quite interesting when you mentioned there the idea of a pirate boarding your ship, and you could die to a pirate, which would mean that your player would die just as a normal death throughout the game, because you are able to interact on your boat like you would anywhere else within Gillenor 2. But yeah, not dying if your ship is capsized. What about in PvP combat? Because I know that we've not really spoke about it a lot here, but in previous streams and stages, we have talked about the idea of having an area of no rules within the sea that might enable PvP combat. How would you see that potentially working, Elena? It might again be a bit too early, but are we thinking that it would be purely based off ship loot, or do we anticipate that players may be able to actually board someone else's ship as well and then kill them on the ship just like they would within the wilderness?
I really like that idea, actually, like boarding other people. Yeah, I honestly don't know. Like, we haven't started designing that yet, so it's all just up in the air right now. I really do like that idea, though. Like, how would you board them? Like, would you just ram into them, or would you like shoot yourself over in a cannon, or like?
I love the idea of shooting. I mean, if we had the most
we've got
dumb
to have that
animation
now.
in existence, but it could
very
be an
old
idea
school
for,
RuneScape.
you know, we've talked about different ship customizations and upgrades. There could be a whole suite of them that are designed just for purely navigating through this dangerous sea that has no rules. You could have a boarding plank or ropes that you shoot out with a harpoon cannon instead of a cannonball cannon, and then scale across them using agility or something, and try not to get shot down with arrows whilst you're
That'd be
doing
cool.
it.
I saw someone say as well, like maybe to indicate that a ship is skulled, like you have a skull sail or something, or like a flag that is a skull, to indicate
like
that the entire ship is skulled.
Oh, Sofa King has just said
Monk-ass.
something really interesting, even though I just read that name out and I realised what I just said, but never mind. Grapple hooks. We have grapple hooks in game. It could make for a great use of them.
Oh yeah,
Board someone else's
That's
ship
true.
by shooting them with a myth crossbow.
maybe that's the grapple hook expansion we've all been waiting for.
I know, 'cause they're
Introducing
so
the
useless.
adamant grapple hook. Oh my god, the Brunite grapple
Yes.
hook.
Awesome. Okay, and the last question, I guess we've kind of covered it. Or we haven't really covered it, but we've said it multiple times. But I really want to reiterate: is PvP optional and avoidable for those who just will never want to engage in PvP, like myself?
Yes.
I think it has
if
to
we
be.
do PvP, like it has to be optional. Don't want to force that upon anyone. But again, like, would really love to do this because it's such a cool thematic, right? Like pirates at sea. Like PvPers would literally be pirates, right? Like pillaging other ships and boarding them and firing cannons and all. It's really cool. But yeah, absolutely opt in.
I think it's
Awesome.
just important to remember that the wilderness works the way that it does now because it was implemented many years ago, and it had a long-standing history, players that were used to the way that it worked and the way that it operates, what it gives you, why you go there. But we have the chance to do something completely different that is built for purpose, as opposed to trying to expand on something that has got that history. So current wilderness, I know a lot of players, we say that it is opt-in, you don't really have to go there unless you don't want to, but that's not technically true. There are clue steps that are there are rewards from bosses that you want to get a hold of that make you feel like you need to go there, training methods that you might want to do, like gin chompers. We can do that completely different when it comes to sailing if we were to go down that route of having PvP combat. So we could make it entirely purely optional, maybe focusing more on like cosmetic aspects as opposed to best in slot upgrades, or like I mentioned, if we had the option to customize ships purely for PvP, it could be that you unlock more customizations for better upgrades that are for only ship-based PvP. So if you're really not interested in it, it won't impact your normal sailing journey or leveling experience in any way, shape, or form, but it will really help you if you are looking to navigate those more dangerous waters. But nothing's set in stone, really. We could completely flip that around, and if people wanted us to make it so you had to go there, we could. I don't think that's going to be the case, though. But I just want to make sure that people aren't falling down the road of, well, Jagex have said this before, it doesn't work with the wilderness because we are forced to go there, but this isn't the wilderness. It won't be the wilderness. It's something brand new, a blank canvas. We can make it whatever we feel like it should be and whatever the players want it to be as well. So just keep it in mind, be open-minded, really, I think.
Well, I'm excited. I'm hyped. And thank you so much for all of your answers, everyone. We are ready to roll the giveaway. So if our wonderful mod behind the scenes can please roll the giveaway. Hopefully we can get the winners. So
good luck, everyone.
Scabby Pilled, lowercase. Let's go. ready. Basically, once we have the winners, we'll announce it. So let's just make like small talk in the meantime.
I see one person has won, apparently, according to Nightbot.
Oh, cool.
it
So our
Wiki?
first winner, Wiki, WYKKIE. Well done, Wiki. You have won one Pride t-shirt. We'll contact you through the old school RS account. Woo! The most pathetic, like, woo, from the team here.
And the second winner, we gotta go big for this one, everyone. Sorry, Light, I'm stealing your thunder. Go.
Hell yeah.
No, you go. I said
go
I'm stealing your
ahead.
thunder. I'm too used to being in host mode. I'm shutting my mouth. It's your turn.
I thought you were gonna be like shiver me timbers.
No, that's your line.
Cargig D1 CARGIGDE. I can't say your name. I'm so sorry, but it's Wiki and Cargigda.
Let's
So
go!
congrats!
Well done.
Well done. We will contact you via the old school account. Arr! Scabby Pill, thank you so much for engaging and taking part, chat. We really appreciate it. And yeah, just thank you so much to this amazing panel. Elena, Ayzia, GentleTractor, the legend. Thank you so much. I feel like we tackled so much in this Q&A.
Yeah, I had a great time.
Thank
Thank you
guys
again,
for having me
honestly. It's been a pleasure to have you here, GentleTractor. Yeah, it is what it is. I'm really glad that you joined. Hopefully you had a good experience. Love to have you on again in the future if you'd be willing, especially when it comes to things like sailing and so on and so forth. And thank you again for all of your hard work. You really have helped us massively. It is hugely appreciated, and I think the player base are going to be even bigger fans of you if they weren't already before.
Oh no, you're far too kind, but yeah, absolutely. It's been a good one, so anytime, no problem.
Thank you. Guys, follow GentleTractor on his socials. Follow him on Twitter. Make sure that you send your love to him because honestly, he's leveled up the blogs in a way that we couldn't even imagine. So please go follow him and send your love in the chat. Any closing words before we round off the stream?
Just want to say, like, thank you to everyone who's left feedback, no matter where it is, like Twitch chat, Reddit, Twitter, like Discord, especially. Huge shout out because we wouldn't have the skill to this. We wouldn't have it this refined without you guys. Like, it is made for the community by the community, and I really mean that. Like, you guys are leading the way of the skill, so keep the feedback coming. Appreciate you all.
Absolutely agree. Yeah, and a big shout out as well to the new Skill Discord server. It's like our little trial project for our basically using Discord moving forwards, and your support in basically getting these questions ready today was super helpful. So thank you to all of our general contributors as well as our members in the new Skill Discord. We really appreciate you. Sorry that I can't be there all the time, but thank you so much for basically just helping us out and giving us your feedback. A lot of your feedback was used to just make tweaks and changes to the blog that's gone out today. So thank you so much. And we will see you on the next stream. Bye, everyone!